What if all your self-improvement is actually just decoration? The 5 a.m. club, affirmations on the mirror, vision boards, dopamine detox, I did all of that. Those are all wonderful. They feel good for 2 weeks, maybe a month. And then you need a new one and another one. But it's not about you being undisciplined. That's literally your brain chasing addictive novelty. And none of these hacks will touch the actual patterns that are keeping you stuck. None of them. I completely changed who I am in the last few years. I went from the people-pleasing, play-it-safe 9-to-5 zombie Marty to the no-bullshit, courageous Marty you see here. I'm traveling freely, I'm building my business, and I'm shameless about my desires, which is why I either reach them or I am on my way to reaching them. And I realized it's not because of any hacks, but it's because of these 5 boring things that I am doing all the time. And these habits don't look good on Instagram. They won't go viral, but they will change who you are underneath. Because you know the saying, just because you put frosting on shit doesn't make it cake. And the habits we are going to look at, they're not the frosting. They are the possible shit that's underneath, which is keeping you where you are. You know, most people doing self-improvement want to improve without looking at the self beneath it. So let's look at it. And by the end of this video, you know exactly how to free yourself from the shit that is keeping you stuck. The first boring habit is watching your automatic thoughts. Why is most self-help bullshit? Because they tell you to change the behavior. Stop smoking, stop eating sugar, work out more, journal, just do the thing. But nobody talks about the invisible script running in your head that is either making you do it or making you ditch it. Let me give you a personal example. For over 10 years of my life, I had an eating disorder. And I'm not talking about a phase, but over a decade of my life was spent obsessing over food. I either ate nothing or nothing remotely unhealthy, or I gloriously let myself eat 1 cookie and skip a meal afterwards. Just 1 cookie. And I celebrated this cookie like it was Christmas morning. I put sweets on a huge pedestal. And then I got into working out and weightlifting and learned more about nutrition. And guess what I did? Did I fix the problem? No! I just found a fancier version of the same problem. I started obsessively baking with protein powder, xylitol, stevia, and I tried to create sugar-free pancakes, sugar-free cookies, sugar-free chocolate sauce. That was my reward for working out so hard every day. You see what happened? The food changed, but the behavior didn't because the thoughts didn't. Sweets in my head were still this huge reward, something special, something that I normally cannot have, and when I do, it must be celebrated. Well, and nowadays, I can have a piece of lemon cake in my fridge for days. Sometimes I take a spoon, and honestly, I don't even know if it's still good. I don't care anymore because I stopped putting sweets on this pedestal. In my thoughts, there wasn't this restriction and then the reward. It's just a food like any other food. And to be honest, most sweets are kind of boring to me now, apart from salty licorice. Is that sexy or a hack that I can give you? No, because it took me years to get to that point. Literal years of slowly dissolving this meaning that I had built around sweets. And 99% of people don't want to hear that because they want the quick fix. They want the 30-day challenge, the detox. But that stuff expires. What I did was boring and slow, but it worked. And that is what I want you to look at in your own life. Watch how you think about the stuff you want to change. It could be smoking, drinking, working out, treating your kids better, quitting your job. Whatever it is, look at how you judge it. Oh, what a day. I deserve a drink. Okay, I went to the gym for 1 whole week. So I kind of earned this burger, right? Just one cigarette. I have been so good the last month. You hear that? This voice sounds harmless, sounds totally normal. But that's the trap, because these automatic, harmless thoughts start before the craving. Let me say that again. These thoughts come before the craving, not after. But you are so used to them that you don't even realize thinking them. You are subconsciously telling yourself, cigarette, 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 I need a cigarette. And when you don't give in to these thoughts, then the physical craving comes. Most people think that the physical craving comes first and the thought is the response, but it's the other way around. So here is what to do. Pick one thing that you want to change and don't do anything about it. Just observe whether you can hear this voice. And after a while, if you catch it, say, stop it, and move your attention elsewhere. You can't just ignore it because it has been there for too long. But if you redirect your attention again and again and again, these thoughts start to lose their grip. And dealing with the physical aspect comes afterwards. And it's no failure if you give in. I gave in for years. And then I was really mean to myself, saying things like, I'm not a dog, I don't need food as a reward, but hating myself into change never worked and will not work for you, not once. And what did work over time, slowly, was catching my thoughts, redirecting them, and maybe giving myself a different reward, like a face mask instead of sweets, or a nice piece of salmon if I want to treat myself to something special. And after some years, my brain started to separate reward from sweets. And then I could ask myself, Marty, do you really like sweets? Are you even a sweet tooth like you always thought you were? And to be honest, I'm not. I deconditioned my whole identity from obsessing over food. There is this idea in Chinese philosophy that I love. You are always cultivating something. You can't not cultivate. What you cultivate matters. So the question is not, how do I stop this habit? The question is, what am I accidentally cultivating that lets me keep this habit? The craving is just the symptom and the thought underneath is the root. But here's what I learned after doing that for a while. Your automatic thoughts don't just randomly float around. They are clustered into patterns, into themes. And those patterns run your entire life without you knowing it, which is what the next boring habit is about, and it is self-observation. And I have a question for you. When was the last time you stepped back and looked at your life from the outside? Not from inside the chaos, from the trenches, but from the outside, like you're watching a character in a series. Because most people try to fix this stuff in their life without really knowing what actually is broken. And self-observation means looking at yourself from the third-person perspective once in a while. What is this person up to? What keeps coming back into their life? So I don't mean a character from a movie with a big, dramatic, heroic arc, but more like a sitcom. What are the recurring episodes? When I was in therapy for over 7 years, I noticed that I keep talking about the same patterns, different conversations, different contexts, different people, but the same damn theme underneath. I started therapy for my eating disorder, but the theme underneath was a lack of control in life and a very unstable self-worth. And once you start seeing this pattern in yourself, you will see it everywhere. Let me give you some examples. I have a friend who is always unsatisfied at work. It doesn't matter which job, but there is always a dispute with her superiors, with her colleagues, and now even with her subordinates. Different jobs, same pattern. Or my gay best friend who has been renovating his rental apartment for over 15 years. Since I moved out after living together with him. Every single time we talk, he either can't use his living room because it's full of boxes, or the fridge is standing in the hallway because he took out the kitchen floor. There is always something, and it feels like he doesn't even want to finish renovating. And when I look at my family, for my mother, it is always her health, or rather a sickness. There is always something wrong, some pain, some symptom, toothache, or just the flu. I never experienced her as fully healthy, not because she never was healthy, but because her pattern is there is always something wrong with my body. And for all of us, those patterns are right there when we step back. But we can't see them because we live inside them. We can't see the forest when we are the tree. So this habit, once again, is not about changing anything. That's why it's so boring. You're just stepping out and watching. And why does this matter so much? Because how you do one thing is how you do everything. Let's say you want to find love and it just never works out. So you, of course, start working on yourself. Self-love journey, better dating skills, different profile pictures. That is all great stuff that might be helpful. But what you actually have is a pattern of throwing everything away to start something new. Because one part of you needs this excitement, the novelty. And this pattern doesn't just show up in your love life, in your work life as well, with your friendships or where you live. And when you finally see that, then you can start working on the real thing. So here's what I want you to do. Ask yourself, what is the recurring theme of my life? What do I find myself repeating again and again? What do I keep talking about? And if you can't see it, ask someone who knows you, someone close that you trust, because I guarantee you, they will know your pattern after 5 seconds. They see it clear as day. You are the only person who doesn't because you live inside it. Your big goals and dreams don't matter if you have this theme that keeps sabotaging you without you knowing. You can put frosting on every area of your life, but if the same shit keeps showing up wearing different costumes, you are not changing, you're just decorating. Now, you might be watching this thinking, okay, Marty, I can see my patterns. I can even see other people's patterns, clear as day. Good. But this is also where it might get uncomfortable. Because the next boring habit is about what happens when you focus on other people's patterns and think it's your job to fix them. The next boring habit is self-responsibility, but maybe not the kind you think. Hey, I noticed you're always sitting so hunched over. That's really bad for your posture, you know? You mentioned wanting to lose weight, so I made a salad instead of pizza for our movie night. Oh, and maybe skip the cashews as a topping. Oh, I noticed some calculation errors in your Excel document, so I went ahead and corrected them before you hand them in, okay? What do you notice? This sounds like a nice person. They even do stuff before being asked. Caring, thoughtful, a good friend and colleague. But you know what they are in reality? An enabler. Because taking responsibility for your own life is already a huge thing. But very often we go even further and take responsibility for other people's lives too. You mean it so well, you want to make their life easier, and that is where it gets dangerous. Think a little outside of the box. Maybe the person with the calculation errors needs to leave them in the document. They need to be called out by the client and need to feel the embarrassment. And then they start improving their performance. Maybe they start learning a new software. And maybe that leads to a promotion. But by correcting their mistakes, you rob them of this whole chain of events. And I know that this isn't a common take. I know that in most friendships, giving advice without being asked, reminding people of their goals without being asked, is a token of friendship. It's considered a sign that you care. And I did that for most of my life. And I'm gonna be honest, I actually felt kind of superior doing that because I have a good memory and I'm disciplined. So reminding people of what they wanted to do, like sticking to their diet, finishing this task, ditching this habit. That made me feel good about myself. And on the surface, you are helping, right? Until I realized it's not my task. It is not your task to be the brain for another person. It is not your duty to help them live their life. Unless, and this is important, they ask you and you are willing. There is a massive difference. Look at this. Hey Marty, I noticed in photos my posture looks horrible. I really look like a shrimp. I am working on that, but I can't always catch myself. So if you notice me sitting hunched over on my laptop or like this with my phone, could you please just say a word? Just shout shrimp and I know what to do. Is that okay with you? That is different. The person took ownership for their own problems. They identified what they need and they specifically asked for help. And now you have the choice to say yes or no. And if you decide to help, that is not enabling but collaboration. And 99% of people won't do this because they think it's cold, because it feels like you don't care, but it's actually the opposite. You are trusting them to figure stuff out on their own. So leave people their own experience of life, positive or negative. It's not your task to intervene, only if they ask. The hardest form of love is letting someone learn their way, even if it is the hard way. And the hardest form of self-responsibility is realizing that half of the stress you have in your life comes from carrying stuff that was never yours to begin with. Okay, so you stopped being everybody else's brain. You started noticing your own patterns. But then there is a mechanism, a very human one, that is running in all of us. And for most of the people, it's doing so much damage. And that is how you measure yourself. Which brings me to the next habit. The next boring habit is changing how you make comparisons. We all always compare ourselves to something. That is just how the brain works. It is a meaning-making machine, and the easiest way to understand something is to compare it to something else. And that is not the problem. The problem is what you are comparing to. And there are two ways to measure yourself. And the first one is the gap. That is when you measure where you are now to where you think you should be, to some ideal you have in your head. Oh, I should be healthy and pain-free. I should be out of debt by now. I think my skin looks too old. I should look younger. Whatever your version of I should be somewhere different looks like. And every time you look up at that ideal, you feel like shit because you're not there. And here is why this never works, and especially ambitious, successful people fall into that trap and stay there. Because ideals are like the horizon in the desert. No matter how many steps forward you take, you will never reach that horizon. And you will never reach your ideals because no matter how far you go, they always move ahead. And this we kind of know, right? But the disturbing part is because when you are in the gap, you can technically make progress and feel worse as a result. Think about this. Kids come to the dinner table. A parent worked hard to cook, nice house, warm family, good food, and the kid sits down and sighs because it's not what they wanted to eat. They are measuring this meal against some ideal dinner in their head. And now they feel disappointed for receiving something different but good. They are literally worse off emotionally for having gotten dinner. And that happens to us adults every day. You got the promotion, but it should have been bigger. You lost 5 kilos, but it should have been 10. You achieved a lot in the last 6 months, but you focus on this one opportunity that you missed. And if you are in the gap a lot, it tends to be about everything: your career, your body, your relationships, your partner, your children, your past. Some people are in the gap so much that no matter what they achieve, their self-confidence decreases with every win, because the ideal is always out there and never in here. And I know this one deeply, especially regarding your past, because I experienced trauma in my childhood: abuse, neglect, pressure, and it would have been so easy to stay in the gap about that, to measure my life against what it should have been, how my parents should have been, how much easier other people have it because they have a good upbringing. And I sure have been in that phase. I spent much time there in my self-pity, but I continued healing and stopped bringing my past into my present, which allows me to create a different future. So when I hear people say, "I never learned how to do this, my parents never showed me, so I can't do it now. I never learned how to love because I never received love, so I can't give it," they are measuring their present against what their ideal past should have been. You can't change the past, but you can change how you measure yourself against it. And the same with health. "Oh, I was so fit in my 20s, and now everything hurts when I wake up. My prime is over." You are measuring your now against a version that doesn't exist anymore. That's the gap, and it will eat you alive if you let it. And the alternative is the gain. Instead of measuring yourself against an ideal in front of you, you measure yourself against where you were before. You look back. How have I grown in the last year? Where was I 5 years ago compared to now? And when you start to do that consistently in every area of life, you will notice wins that you wouldn't have counted before. For me, being in the game nowadays comes pretty naturally, which means that I quickly notice when other people are in the gap and comparing themselves to some kind of illusion. So here is what I want you to do, and it's simple and boring. You will have heard that a million times. At the end of the day, write down 3 wins. And they don't need to be big. It could be something new that you learned, or even something that went badly. It could be some small progress, or just that you nailed your eyeliner. Whatever, 3 small wins every single day. Because whatever you focus on expands. Whatever you see, you create more of. And if you start focusing on the gains, you will feel like you are actually winning. Because you are. You just weren't measuring it. You don't have to lower your ambitions, have massive goals, go 10x if you want. The difference is to stop measuring yourself against them and instead measure yourself against where you started. That is how you stay ambitious and don't destroy yourself in the process. And I can tell you that this one boring shift in my everyday life has done so much for my mental health. Okay, so now you learned to watch your thoughts. You started noticing your patterns. You stopped carrying other people's lessons. And you started measuring yourself correctly. But there is one more boring habit. And honestly, that is the one that holds everything together. Because all of this inner work won't mean anything if you can't do this one thing that every part of you will resist. And that is sitting still when it gets uncomfortable. And this last boring habit is probably the hardest because it asks you to do nothing. Sit in silence with discomfort instead of immediately fixing it. In our time, everything seems to be so focused on doing something. Something feels bad? Change it. Someone upset you? Respond. Are you bored? Then scroll. Are you sad? Eat. Are you stressed? Drink. We have a reaction for every single discomfort. And most of them are just automatic. We don't realize that we are doing them, and others even enforce us to do it. And the hard part about doing nothing is that it feels worse than doing something. That's why nobody does it. Think about it. Something bad happens and you feel awful. Why should you respond to that with something that makes you feel even worse, like sitting still with this awful feeling? Or even worse, sitting still in silence with it. That is so inconvenient when we seem to have a quick fix for everything. And most people choose ease over inconvenience. They choose noise over stillness. When I realized that my job as a consultant was suffocating me and turning me into a zombie, I looked up how to raise employee well-being. How can I use my strengths at work? How can I find a purpose outside of work? But after all of that, when I just sat still and listened, to be honest, I don't want to work for anybody. I don't want to apply somewhere else. I want to do my own thing. I want to start my own business and share my gifts. Or in the last years of my 9-year relationship, I read books about intimacy. I learned about love languages. I thought about couples therapy. But I still vividly remember this one afternoon where I just sat for a couple of hours in a small enchanted cemetery in Berlin. And I deeply felt that there is nothing to fix anymore. Despite being engaged, despite being in love for many years, but now our paths are just too different. So in this silence, I chose to end this relationship. And that is why I say that this habit is what holds everything together. Because you can't hear your automatic thoughts when there is no silence in your head, when you don't mute your constant chatter. You can't observe your life patterns if you're always doing something and reacting. And you can't stop enabling others when you're not capable of sitting in the discomfort of watching them struggle. This silence and sitting with discomfort is the one lever. This is the boring thing underneath all boring things. So here is my challenge. The next time you experience something uncomfortable, resist the urge to react. Just for 5 minutes, sit with it in silence. Do nothing. That's it. Just sit with whatever you are feeling. Experience it and let it be there. And I'm gonna be honest with you, 99% of people won't do this. First, because just 5 minutes of sitting with discomfort in silence feels like an eternity, when in our time the whole world revolves around avoiding it. And secondly, because it's scary what might come out of it. But that is also why 99% of people live their life on repeat and wonder why nothing changes. And the 1% who do this, they look boring on the outside. They do nothing. But in reality, they are doing the scariest, most courageous thing, which is just being with yourself. And they are the ones who will change. So now I gave you 5 boring habits for improving yourself. And we all want to improve ourselves, right? But we focus too much on the improve and too little on the self. Just because you put frosting, the hacks and tips and tricks on shit, it won't make it cake. So don't do everything at once. Just pick one habit. Pick the one that made you maybe a little uncomfortable, and ideally stay with it for years. Because after a while, if you stop and measure yourself backward, you will see how far you already are. And I want to thank you for watching until the end. Tell me, which of these boring habits made you most uncomfortable, or which are you maybe already doing? I read all of the comments. And if at one point in this video you found value, please give it a like and subscribe for more. I appreciate you guys so much. I'm so excited where this channel will be heading, and see you soon.